Crater Lake is widely considered one of the most haunted and mysterious places in Oregon, rooted in indigenous legends of a doorway to hell and modern reports of strange, unexplainable events. Its deep, clear waters and haunting legends have made it a hotspot for paranormal enthusiasts, researchers, and tourists alike. Join us for this installment of Haunted Parks. Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. My name is Elise, and I'm your host. And I am excited. Tomorrow is my birthday. I am turning 30, which seems crazy, but I have heard that your 30s are like the best. So I'm really hoping that my 30s will be great. So, yes, I will be turning 30 tomorrow, and I'm excited. I don't feel like I'm turning 30 at all. I still feel pretty young, but I'm excited and I hope that you guys have a good Wednesday. And I hope you all had a great Memorial Day weekend, spending it with family, friends, whatever you did. Hopefully it was safe. I suspect we're going to see a lot more um, outdoors news soon because it's the summer officially. And there's always a ton of accidents and issues and all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in the summer outside. So be looking for the nature news that I do so that you can stay up to date on all the crazy things that happen outside. So before we get into today, I am doing something special in June. I don't want to say what it is. I want it to be a surprise, but just be watching your feed in June because I am going on a road trip with my mother and I will be dropping some really cool stuff. So I am going to pre record everything and so that when I'm on my road trip, you can still listen. I am so excited. It's not going to be the typical Morbid Outdoors episode, and that's okay. It will be a little different and it will be kind of fun. Yeah, so, anyways, let's dive into Crater Lake National Park. All right, so I'm going to start with negative reviews. Tammy said, wanted to love this much, but unfortunately, worst park yet, and we have gone to over 10 on this trip. If you're not the right tense of your, if you're going to touch the water or swim or anything, that's a no. It's over 2 miles, so to get there. Fine, no big deal, but it's according to the paper, and the ranger almost straight down, then straight back up. Okay, it's really hard to read these reviews when the grammar is so bad, so I apologize. I'm reading it literally word for word. We have hiked some crazy places, dangerous places, but only one trail to the bottom? That's not cool. What about making more? Not fair. There was only one to the bottom where you could swim, only a top view. It was a waste for us. Well, Tammy, sounds like you couldn't hack the trail. All right, Nathan says, it's a big hole in the ground, but you can't even see the bottom because it's filled with water. There were places to park, but no large paved areas to set up my cornhole boards. When I finally was able to find a place to set up my cornhole boards, a ranger told me to move my cornhole boards out of the emergency lane. I've set up my cornhole boards at the neighborhood park for years without one problem. A butterfly landed on me, but there was no bathroom nearby to wash off the flower goo. I don't think I've ever said cornhole boards. If you don't know what that is, it's also called Bago. It's like the tossing game where you have like little crap, what the crap are they called? It's like the flat board and there's like a hole at the top and you have 2 of them and you stand across. I hope that you know what cornhole is. Some of you might, but where I'm from, it's called Bago. Anyway, so let's go to the next review. More than just a pretty lake. Yeah, it's also a mosquito fest. We went to one of the trails to go see the lake, and we were just clouded by mosquitoes everywhere. I've never seen any other national park like this. We were just in Lassen Volcanic National Park the other day and didn't see any mosquitoes at all. It's such a shame that a national park is so unkempt. Definitely do not recommend bringing your kids either. They will get bitten everywhere, and it is a huge mess. The line to get in the park is also unnecessarily long, and all the good trails and visitor centers are super crowded. Don't waste your time here. Um, I love negative reviews about national parks. I really do. I think they're highly entertaining. Some of them have good points, but obviously the crazy ones don't. So now let's get into I want to acknowledge that the land now known as Crater Lake National Park rests on the ancestral homelands of the Klamath tribes, including the Klamath, Modoc, and Yahuskin peoples. For thousands of years, these communities have maintained a deep spiritual, cultural, and physical connection to this landscape, known to them as a place of profound significance. Crater Lake itself, formed within the remains of Mount Mazama, holds sacred meaning and is woven into the oral traditions and histories of the Klamath people. These lands were not only home, but a source of identity, stewardship, and life. We recognize their enduring presence, resilience, and contributions of Indigenous peoples past, present, and future. We honor their role as the original stewards of this land and commit to learning from and respecting their ongoing relationship with it. We have gone to Crater Lake before on Morbid Outdoors a couple times, at least once before when we talked about a missing child, Samuel Belkey. And Crater Lake is amazing. I used to live about an hour away from Crater Lake National Park. I only lived in Oregon for a year, but it was amazing. And I cannot wait to go back. I mean, I've been back since, but Oregon is so, so pretty. Crater Lake is one of the hot spots from the missing 411 cases. I'm not saying I believe in all that, but I'm just saying I do want to note that because there are a lot of very strange things that happen in and around Crater Lake National Park. It was established in 1902 and it's the fifth oldest national park in the United States and the only national park in Oregon. The park encompasses the caldera of Crater Lake, a remnant of Mount Mazama, a destroyed volcano, and the surrounding hills and forests. Now, the lake is 1,949 feet or 594 meters deep at its deepest point, which makes it the deepest lake in the United States and the second deepest in North America and the 10th deepest lake in the entire world. The national park encompasses over 183,000 acres. And a significant thing about Crater Lake, this is actually really cool. It has no streams flowing into or out of it. So all the water that enters the lake is eventually lost from evaporation or subsurface seepage. The lake's water is commonly has a striking blue hue, and the lake is refilled entirely from direct precipitation in the form of snow and rain. It is I mean, it's like a blue that you've never seen in your entire life unless you've seen it in person. It is so, so pretty. When I was there, they started doing construction on the Cleetwood Cove Trail, which is the one trail, to get down to the bottom. So I didn't get to swim in Crater Lake, but I hope to next time I go because whoa, it looks amazing. Now, according to the Köppen climate classification system, Crater Lake National Park has a dry summer subarctic climate. It snows a lot up there. I have snowshoed there before, like 11 plus feet of snow. It's crazy amount of snow up there. It is beautiful, but because of all the snow, that means that the time that you can spend in and around Crater Lake is pretty short. I would say, like, June, July through, like, early October, and that's pretty much it, because it starts snowing up there super, super fast in the fall, and then the snow just keeps going until, May, June, and it is beautiful. I've gone in the winter, I've gone in summer. If you wanna see the lake, go in the summer, but if you wanna experience the snow up there, definitely recommend the ranger-guided snowshoe hikes. It was really, really fun. Now, despite it being very cold up there and there's like an average annual snowfall of 463 inches or 1,180 centimeters, this lake rarely freezes over due in part to a relatively mild onshore flow from the Pacific Ocean. So it really doesn't freeze. And the last recorded year in which the lake froze over was 1949, and it was a very long and cold winter. A 95% surface freeze occurred in 1985, but since then, there have really I mean, global warming, but there's really not been a year where the lake has frozen over since then. Mammals that are residents of this national park include Canadian lynxes, bobcats, beavers, pronghorns, porcupines, black bears, coyotes, pika badgers, deer, elk, muskrats, and martens. There are a lot of birds, like a peregrine falcon, American dipper, ravens, Canada jays, bald eagles, hummingbirds, spotted owls, and Canadian geese. And so it's a super amazing, very one of a kind national park, in my opinion. Now, I want to start with why, like, I'm kind of going back over Crater Lake, some of the history, because some of the history is actually why it's, like, why it's creepy and maybe haunted. There's some things that happened, and we'll talk about those. But I do want to point out another thing that is really unique about Crater Lake is because the lake is believed to have no indigenous fish, but several species of fish were introduced beginning in 1888 um, until fish stocking ended in 1941. So within Crater Lake, you could find kokanee salmon and rainbow trout, and they thrive here. Swimming is allowed in the lake, and boat tours, which stop at Wizard Island and a few other places. And if you want to fish in Crater Lake, there's no limit because they do not want the fish in the lake. They were introduced before we knew about conservation and invasive species and everything like that. And so if you go fishing, you can catch as much kokanee salmon and rainbow trout, as many as you want and keep them, which is really cool. Again, if you want to go down to the shore, you have to take Cleetwood Trail. It's very steep. There are no roads for cars, trucks, or wagons that lead to the waterfront, so you can only hike down there. All of the boats in the lake were delivered by helicopter. So literally, you cannot get to the shore unless you're walking down there. Okay, so local indigenous tribes, they actually witnessed the collapse of Mount Mazama and they kept the event alive in their legends. So the legend goes there were two chiefs, one Lao of the below world and Skell of the above world. And they basically were pitted in a battle, which ended up in the destruction of Lao's home, Mount Mazama. So that was their explanation for what happened. And according to Andrea Lankford, author of Haunted Hikes, Spine Tingling Tales and Trails from North America's National Parks, Lao and Skell fought gory battles here. Lao ripped Skell's heart from his chest, and Skell retaliated by dismembering Lao and throwing the body parts into the lake. Hideous monsters gobbled up everything but Lao's head, but the lake still holds Lao's spirit. When stirred, he may brew up storm clouds. When angered, he may appear in the form of a giant crayfish that climbs up out of the lake, snatches people off of the rim of the crater that surrounds the lake, and drags them down into the water. So that's like the indigenous lore on Crater Lake, and it's really gory. It's very like morbid and I love it. And we're going to talk about why Crater Lake is like a hotspot for kind of some crazy shit and why it's haunted. Um so Crater Lake, like I said, is widely considered To be one of the most haunted and mysterious places in Oregon. There has, it's indigenous legends that there's a doorway to hell, and there's been a lot of modern reports of weird things happening. There's been strange disappearances, UFO sightings, and all kinds of other things. So the Klamath, Modoc, and Yahoo tribes, which were indigenous to the area, they regard Crater Lake as a site of power and danger. According to tribal lore, the lake serves as a gateway between Earth and the underworld, with supernatural beings residing within its depths. It is believed that gazing too long at the mesmerizing waters can hold a person captive, ultimately leading to their demise. There are a few haunted land masses of Crater Lake. There are three islands within Crater Lake, and they harbor their own eerie stories, which adds to the lake's allure. So the first one is Wizard Island, and it's named for its resemblance to a wizard's hat. It's said to be haunted because numerous witnesses have reported seeing ghostly campfires on and around the island. So, despite extensive investigations by Crater Lake rangers, there's been no evidence of fires, smoke, or ashes that were ever found. So, people will see like campfires on the lake, like on the island, and there's no camping allowed down there. So when rangers investigate, they don't find anything. And I find that so intriguing. Then there's Phantom Ship Island. Depending on the time of day and the angle of observation, Phantom Ship Island appears to vanish, which is how it earns its name because it's like an optical illusion. You can see it, and then maybe the next minute, if you move like the angle of where you're watching from, you can't see it. So it looks like it vanishes. And then the most interesting one to me is the old man of the lake. This is like the strangest phenomenon at Crater Lake. It's a log and this is what they call it, the old man of the lake. It's a log that has floated upright for over a century without any weight. It literally is just floating there. So it defies physics, which is crazy. The log remains a mystery to both visitors and rangers. There's no explanation. It protrudes 4 feet above the waterline, while the rest of it extends 30 feet below the surface. So it's just like a 34-foot log that's just upright and bobbing, and there's no explanation for it. And people, I think, also say, like, it can predict, the weather or any, like, bad events that happen because I think they tried taking it out a long time ago, and then there was, like, crazy shit that happened, so they put it back in. So, I think it's interesting, and I really love that they just call it the old man of the lake, like, just an old guy, just an old log bobbing around, just because there's no explanation for why. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of mysterious disappearances and suicides around Crater Lake National Park. Crater Lake has a dark history of accidental deaths, suicides, and even murders. In some cases, bodies have been lost in the dense woods surrounding the lake, only to be discovered as skeletons years later. One haunting incident occurred in 1947 when park visitor Mr. Cornelius attempted suicide by sliding into the lake, breaking his ankle in the process. Undeterred, he crawled to the water's edge and drowned himself, leaving no explanation for his actions. I can't even imagine what it would have been to witness that. I mean, it is a very, very long, way down from the rim to the lake, and then he, breaks his ankle, and he's still determined to do this, and he crawls to the water's edge and drowns himself. I don't know, that's just crazy. Another chilling story revolves around a photographer named Charles McCullough who visited Crater Lake in 1974 and never left. In 1976, rangers found only his pants, socks, and bone fragments, as if the rest of his body had melted away. The whereabouts of his coat, shirt, and camera equipment remain unknown. And if you want to get more of a deep dive on this case, I haven't covered it, but, Locations Unknown did cover it, and they did a really good job of covering it because they actually got FBI released some FOIA request on this case. And so you can go hear their very deep dive. And then in 2006, Sammy Belkey, an 8-year-old boy, was with his father, Kenneth, on October 14th, 2006, near the Cleetwood Cove area at Crater Lake National Park. At around 4 p.m., Sammy ran up a cinder slope into the woods and vanished, never to be seen again. Despite an extensive search, no trace of Sam or his remains have ever been found. And it's a really weird case. So, Sammy's case was featured in, I think, the Missing 411 documentary. So it will be 20 years in October, and they have not found a single sign or trace of Sammy Belkey. And that is insane because when he went, I mean, he was 8 when he went missing, and it was like a crazy, crazy search, like a very detailed search because he was a little boy and they never found him. And so he's one of the like most popular cases when you hear about mysterious disappearances in Oregon. Sammy Belkey is always, always mentioned. There are ghostly tales from Crater Lake National Park. The paranormal activity at Crater Lake extends beyond its shores to the Crater Lake Lodge. The lodge is allegedly haunted by a little girl who roams its halls, as well as a Chinese man who haunts the elevator. So, those are two ghosts in the lodge that supposedly are still lingering around. Now, I didn't stay at the lodge because it's always packed and I lived close by, so I didn't need to stay at the lodge. But if you're in Crater Lake, definitely stop by there because it is really cool architecture and just very pretty, like very old school national park lodge. And I just really find it beautiful. There's also phantom campers. So Ranger Jan Kerwan refers to Crater Lake as a ghost and goblin park, and it's easy to see why. The phantom campers spotted by rangers are just one example of eerie occurrences that have been reported within this park. These ghostly figures and their campfires seem to vanish without a trace when approached, adding to Crater Lake's mysterious allure. So these are the campers that are seen on the island in the lake. And then when rangers go to check it out, there's nothing there. There's also a Crater Lake serpent. A Georgia woman claimed to have witnessed a dragon like creature swimming away from her boat while exploring Crater Lake. Despite her attempts to warn others of the monster lurking in the lake's depths, few have taken her story seriously. So, I don't know. That's like one of the cryptid things where there's like a monster in Crater Lake. And honestly, it's so deep, I wouldn't be surprised. There's a lot of things below the surface of Crater Lake that we will never see again. So I'm gonna get into that pretty soon. You can't talk about a haunted park without talking about UFO sightings. Crater Lake National Park has been the site of many, many UFO sightings. On February 4th, 1997, three bright disks were seen speeding across the lake, followed by strange lights in the sky that later disappeared into the water. These unexplained sightings have fueled speculation of otherworldly activity in the area. And honestly, if you go to Crater Lake National Park, it might be worth staying in the lodge so that you can watch the lake and see if you see anything like that. Because I think that would totally just mess with my head. Like, that would be so cool to see, but also I think I would be like scared shitless for sure. And there's also been, guess what? Bigfoot encounters. It is a hot spot for Bigfoot sightings, and rangers have reported following a large, dark, foul smelling creature through the woods. Now, when I read that, I first think of bear because they are large, dark, and foul smelling. But this creature throws pine cones at the rangers when they get too close. So, probably not a bear, but what is it? Theories of Bigfoot deaths at Crater Lake have also surfaced, including one involving a car accident and another involving a train collision. So, it's like Bigfoot's causing some mysterious deaths. I don't know. So this is a crazy thing that I found while I was looking online. There have been two aviation incidents in Crater Lake, and I want to tell you about them. So In 1944, two Grumman torpedo planes were flying in formation on a clear day when one suddenly vanished without a trace. No distress call was made, and the plane's disappearance remains a mystery. Search and rescue teams later determined that the plane had crashed into the lake and sunk to the bottom, but the cause of the crash is still unknown. So that was quite a while ago, okay? But then in 1995, an AS-350 helicopter with an unknown number of people aboard crashed and sank into Crater Lake on Saturday, September 23rd. There were no survivors. The helicopter, which could hold up to 6 people, sank into the lake, which is about 1,500 feet deep at the crash site. So that was from directly from an incident report. And then, followed up on that, the names of the pilot and the passenger who died in the helicopter crash into Crater Lake on September 23rd were released. The pilot was GC 52 of Washington, and his sole passenger was ET of West Lynn, Oregon. The search is continuing for any further clues on the cause of the accident. The helicopter was an aerospatial AS 350B1 A Star owned by American Euro Helicopter of Grand Prairie, Texas, and it was actually en route from Seattle to Las Vegas when the accident occurred. The helicopter crashed in open water about a mile from the shoreline of the lake below Crater Lake Lodge. Now, a ton of people saw this. It broke up upon impact, and pieces of the craft sank quickly to an estimated depth of about 1,500 feet. Neither body has been recovered. The park is exploring methods for determining the location of the wreckage. Jet fuel and other contaminants were released into the lake's pristine waters. Most of the spilled jet fuel has already evaporated, and it's likely that 99% will evaporate over the next few days or weeks. There's also small amounts of more viscous fluids in the helicopter, which will take longer to evaporate. The cause of the crash was still unknown at this time, and the weather was clear at the time that the helicopter went down. So then there was another follow up later on in September, and representatives from the FAA and National Transportation Safety Board are in the park to look at the material collected from the crash site and to determine the investigation into the cause of the crash. A number of eyewitnesses observed the incident from the Caldera Rim and from Crater Lake Lodge. So imagine it's 1995, September, you're enjoying Crater Lake National Park, and all of a sudden you see a helicopter hit the water, break up, and then just sink. That would be really, really a crazy thing to witness. It goes on to say the weather was reportedly perfect with glass smooth water producing mirror like reflections. Witnesses told investigators that the helicopter made a turn near Wizard Island towards the lodge and continued in that direction while making a slow descent. Nothing appeared to be wrong. The helicopter appeared to just fly into the lake. It then tumbled and sank. Park personnel were on the scene within 20 minutes. They were able to recover a large piece of the helicopter, personal gear, and a logbook. The park staff is developing plans and alternatives for recovering the helicopter, but such an operation will likely have to take place next summer as winter weather conditions are beginning to settle in. So, I actually did a little bit of more Googling. And so there have been two aviation incidents within Crater Lake National Park, which to me is very interesting. I know, like, planes and helicopters would go down a lot back in the day, like, in the 40s and stuff. But it's just interesting that all of these things are still at the bottom of the lake. So the lake is home to some human remains that we know of from these crashes. And when I was looking online, I found an interesting post on the Crater Lake Institute, and I want to read that. So, um this is what it says. So the helicopter crash that happened, it was actually the passenger's 45th birthday, and they were out on a like birthday helicopter ride and they crashed. And that is really really sad. It says in June 1996, Park Superintendent Al Hendricks was quoted as saying, The technology is there to proceed with recovery. What we are struggling with is whether it's worth it. Both families decided that the bottom of Crater Lake would be a pretty good place for the crash victims to spend eternity. And then to Larry Smith, December 1st, 2003, a follow up letter to the helicopter crash. Quote, in 1995, my best friend from childhood to Vietnam and up until 1995, George Causey ended up at the bottom of Crater Lake. I would like to know if anything has occurred since I visited there in October 1995. Has anything floated to the top? Is a helicopter still at the bottom? Any information would sincerely be appreciated. Anything at all. Thanks, Jim Pruitt. And then he leaves his email. Jim's request was sent to retired Chief Ranger George Buckingham, who handled the original investigation. This was his response. December 4th, 2003. Nothing new floated up while I was at the park. Did you know that the park negotiated a settlement that funded the side scanning sonar survey? Found no helicopter or body parts. The families were content to leave things as they are. For what it's worth, I don't think it's worthwhile to pursue the subject any further. They use the latest technology to try to find it. And even if they did find it, the cost slash effect slash impact of raising would not accomplish anything other than to remove some trash. I think the impact would be much greater than any benefit in removal. National Park Service and concessionaires have dumped more than that in the lake over the years. Um, I think that that was the craziest, reply. I just think it was so insensitive. It was so rude, I think. I don't know, it's like you have this man that's really sad because one of his very good friends died and his remains are in Crater Lake, and he's wanting to know if there's been anything found, and this ranger is like, "No, F you, nothing's been found." And I find it very suspicious that he said, "Found no helicopter or body parts," like, with a side scanning sonar survey, and given it was in the '90s, so the technology probably wasn't that great, but it's interesting to me that the sonar did not find any helicopter or body parts. And then I also think it's weird that he said, "For what it's worth, I don't think it's worthwhile to pursue this subject any further." I'm like, that is that is insane to say that. And then there's like another follow-up. It says, "Larry and Steve, I spoke with a lodge guest who actually witnessed the helicopter crash on the clear September morning. So there were witnesses. Of course, they said that as soon as the ship's runners struck the lake surface, the copper flipped and immediately sank. Easy to miss since it all occurred so quickly." And then it says, "P.S. Crash site between Wizard Island and Lodge as viewed from Mather Point." And then we have another reply, and this was January 5th, 2014. It says, "This story about Crater Lake ran tonight on KDRV 12 in Medford." And it says, "Hey Larry, thanks for forwarding the clip about air crashes at Crater Lake National Park. During the late 1960s, while I was studying at the lake with Jack Donaldson and Owen Hoffman, park biologist Dick Brown told us the story of two aircrafts that crashed in the lake during the 1940s. Two Army Air Corps biplanes, possibly primary trainers, from Kingsley Field in Klamath Falls flew into the caldera and proceeded to cross the lake barely above the water, one plane closely trailing the other. Each plane contained a student and an instructor. Like the 1995 helicopter crash, the pilot of the first plane apparently failed to distinguish the sky from water. I don't know how that happens. That's me. The plane hit the water, sending a wall of water and plane parts skyward and downed the trailing plane. Also, like the 1995 crash, aircraft debris and bodies largely disappeared beneath the waves and were never recovered. I'm reporting what I heard. The story sticks in my memory because I've always been greatly interested in airplanes and aviation. Can anyone confirm, deny, or amend the story? Were there any witnesses to the crash?" And that was a former lake researcher named Doug Larson. I just think that is so, I don't know, just that thread. Like I said, this is Crater Lake Institute. I'll link it in the show notes. It's a Smith history from 1995 helicopter crashes into the lake. And I just think that it's just insane. Like all of that information that's in that and like these real people like talking to each other on this like forum, and I just think like the former chief ranger's reply is really suspicious. I just think it's crazy that there have been 2 or more aviation incidents in Crater Lake, and I know that the lake is really deep and getting the stuff out would be really hard, but it's just I don't know, it just feels, like, creepy. So, those are all Crater Lake is very strange. I was told to be careful around Crater Lake. I used to listen to a podcast that was specifically an Oregon true crime podcast, and it was 2 ladies from Oregon, and they were like, "Crater Lake has some weird energy and yada yada." Yeah, Crater Lake is beautiful, but it's also very creepy, and if you go and there's like an uneasy feeling that I have felt all the times that I've been there. So, as we come to the end of this episode, it's hard not to feel the weight of a place like Crater Lake National Park lingering just a little longer than expected. There's something about that deep and possibly blue water. It's so still and so quiet, and it makes you wonder what stories it holds beneath the surface. Whether you believe the legends of spirits, echoes of the past, or simply the power of isolation playing tricks on the mind, Crater Lake has a way of getting under your skin. Maybe it's the history, centuries of indigenous stories tied to this land, speaking of powerful forces and sacred ground. Maybe it's the sheer remoteness, where the silence feels just a little too complete. Or maybe it's the countless visitors who've sworn they felt watched, heard something they couldn't explain, or experienced something they've never quite been able to shake. But like many of the places we talk about here, haunted or not, there's a balance to strike. These landscapes are beautiful and powerful and sometimes and oftentimes unforgiving. If you ever find yourself standing on the rim, looking out over the dark water, take a moment to respect both the history and the environment around you. Stay on the marked trails, be prepared for quickly changing weather, and let someone know where you're going. Because while the unknown can be intriguing, the wilderness itself is often the most real danger. And maybe, just maybe, that's what like makes places like Crater Lake feel so eerie in the first place. The reminder that we are all small and we are not entirely in control. So, whether you think the stories are something supernatural or something a little more grounded, one thing is certain: Crater Lake doesn't easily let go of those who experience it. And who knows, if you ever visit, you might leave with a story of your own. As always, recreate responsibly and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. You can also join us on Patreon for early and ad free content. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.